We have Ms. Quanita Ali Khan serving as Education Specialist at the World Bank. She has led the implementation of the first ever trust fund for promoting financial inclusion and literacy for cash transfer using digital technologies in Pakistan. Please welcome Ms. Quanita Ali Khan.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure being here. Before I start, I have two post-its staring at me even before I say salam. It's 5 minutes waiting, and time is up. So whoever's left the post-it, it's not the best start. Do we have a presentation that we can load? I shared a presentation. Yeah. So they've given my introduction, and yes, I'm an economist. I work with the bank. We talk about payments and digital payments. I'd like to call it payments for progress, because it's not just payments for economic growth, it's payments for inclusion, and it's payments for, okay, yeah. Oh, can we do the previous slide, please? Okay, I should have got it, yeah. So this is a picture. I mean, I wanted to start off by giving a perspective. We've all talked a lot about digitalization and payments. This lady is Lakshmi. She's from Sakhar, Sindh. She was on my first technology-based payments, which we used to call at that time in 2012. Now it's digital payments or digital transactions that we call in the bank now. She was one of my first beneficiaries to get the debit card in Sakhar. And her story is beautiful. She's one of the women why I, as a woman, am standing here. I launched the first financial inclusion literacy trust fund because of women like this, where they were given the promise of a debit card and the promise to go independently and get cash from any kiosk, any ATM, any POS machine. For the first time, anybody in Sakhar, being a woman, received a debit card. Lakshmi's story is not just about economic growth, about inclusion. Her story is that she was socially included for the first time. So as an economist, everybody asks me to justify why digital payments is good for growth. I think before we even go into that, your economic growth, your economic potential are the women in your economy. And once you're socially including them, I don't think there's an economic justification anymore. So we have so many of these and so many more Rihanas and Lakshmis who get a debit card, and one of the criteria of getting them is to get a CNIC. When they get a CNIC, they have an access to a transaction account. For them, that's the first time they have a voice. They have the dignity, the right to vote, and empowerment. So I think that's when the argument for economic growth rests. When you're empowering women, you're having them go towards social inclusion. And that is and should be the story of financial inclusion. Next slide. So this is one of the work we do at the bank is with the State Bank of Pakistan is a national financial inclusion strategy, and we have the numbers on financial inclusion. You've seen the numbers presented by others. We had a very engaging presentation earlier by Ignite. Looking at progress, in 70 years, Pakistan has had 100 million Pakistanis which are unbanked, and only 13% of us adults have a formal account. Now, what this is not equal to, I'd like to put in the numbers here, is the 5 years of progress we've made in G2P, which is government to person payments, and specifically G2P for women and girls. I'd like to focus here specifically on women and girls. Thank you, thank you. On women and girls here, given the theme of this conference, and it's a pleasure to see so many women at an ICAP conference. I think the first ones I must have attended was when I started off my career in the bank in 2010, and I didn't see any women. So I'm sorry for the interjection in the middle, but it is amazing to see them, and amazing to have you steering this. I mean, that's just a journey on its own. So back to the presentation, but this is very heartening for me to see so many women. So when you look at this presentation, what we've done in 5 years by giving debit cards, by giving mobile payments to women and girls who are beneficiaries of BIS, beneficiaries of the stipends program in Punjab, which is for secondary schools, of the CCT programs that we have, we have brought more than 5%, which is almost 6% population in the country of the women which has a transaction account. So this kind of progress is definitely much higher. Including the women, you can meet your targets of inclusion. Taking them as agents of change, taking them as your economic advantage is the next step. So they don't need financial inclusion, they need to be included, period. Next. So now coming back to where I was told to talk about mainly was the economic case for digital payments from the bank's perspective. So at the World Bank, what we did was for most of our programs which we have, we launched digital payments, and the initial way of paying money was using Pakistan Post. As you can see, the journey has been phenomenal. When we started off with the Benazir Income Support Program, which was our first test case, we gave money to women who were older, and we gave them a debit card who did not have a CNIC even before they got the debit card. So the journey was not just difficult, but it was also very exciting. And it's not just had social returns, it had so many economic returns. So we've got, after the switch over to digital methodologies, we've got almost 50% reduction in service charges, and commissions are halved now. So there's a, the fallacy is, there's a myth that when you give a card, it's going to be more expensive. When you give technology, it's going to be more expensive. What we don't realize is technology increases efficiency, transparency, and effectiveness. And there's so many costs you overcome. And like all of you who interact with people from lower and middle income stratas, you give them a mobile phone, they'll learn on their own. So you give somebody a technology, it'll crowdsource. The business model needs to be good. So I think saying that technology will not give economic returns is a myth. It doesn't make sense anymore. Technology will give returns. So you've got about 90% beneficiaries who are receiving payment through debit cards in less than 72 hours, and these are beneficiaries in rural Pakistan. So they make it to the debit card machine, they make it to an ATM. By saying somebody in rural Tharparkar may not be able to make it to a POS machine, for the cash, they will. And these numbers show the reality of the argument. Next. I'm just kind of highlighting the comparative advantage Pakistan has. I worked in, for some of these programs and looked at costing of payment service providers. So we always like to have the dismal figure for Pakistan, and we say, no, we're very expensive, technology is very expensive here, we have issues in delivery. So while we're not the cheapest, but you compare it to Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Pakistan, and Tanzania, compared to Tanzania, our service charges are much lower. And compared to Brazil and Indonesia, it's comparable. Indonesia is 2.2%, and the depth of the program is much higher. Brazil has the largest G2P program for ultra-poor beneficiaries, and we're not much more expensive than that. So yes, the promise is there. It's how you want to take it forward. Coming to the elements of cost and returns, everybody keeps asking me, what is the most efficient technology to give cash to beneficiaries? Is it the debit card? Is it the mobile phone? So it's an agglomeration of costs. It's not just the payment instrument. It's where the payment mechanism is, where the payment instrument is, what the payment mechanism is, what the system is, and what is the authentication procedure. In some places, biometric IDs are much cheaper. In some places, they're more expensive, given the payment platform that's supporting it. A lot of you have talked about it before me on payment systems, payment platforms, so I won't go into this, but feel free to refer to me if you want to know on the technology side and the experiences in these countries. The summary of the slide is that the nuts and bolts of getting there should not be deterred by costs. The costs will fall into place. You need to have the right partnerships and the right technology, which needs to be customized for the region you're working in. And it'll make sense. The business model will work. Next. What you need to be aware of, and I'm sure because all of you being from the field of chartered accountancy, you know the value of numbers more than I do and how to make the bottom line meet. So for those of you who now know numbers, you'd appreciate that the numbers speak for themselves. It's the social angle that doesn't, that you need to understand. So this slide, I feel, is one of the most powerful slides in the whole presentation. When you give a card to a woman, you need to make it work for the first time. If she doesn't understand the use of the card the first time, and that also from the lower strata of society, she's not going to use it again. So you've lost your one and only chance with your customer. So looking at that, you need to look at the number. First is 94%. So giving digital payments to these women allowed us to increase CNICs in the country by 94%. So imagine the empowerment that happened with 94% more beneficiaries having a digital ID through a CNIC. But there's a huge caveat to this. 28% women are less likely to have a bank account than men. So even if you give them the means, they may still not go for it. So you have one chance to make the case right. Plan it well and do it properly. A lot of us now have transaction accounts. And when we talk about the national financial inclusion strategy, there are different kinds of accounts we talk about. I'm really happy that we're focusing on a digital account and a transaction account, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. You need to look at accounts more than just transaction accounts. You need to look at products, at financial services, as savings, as instruments for access to finance. So when you design this, make sure that the transaction account is sticky, that the woman uses it for not just transactions, but more than that. So you have your one window of opportunity that you need to utilize. And giving that, you need to put the woman at the center. And how do you do this? You need to show the card as a sense of pride, as a sense of dignity, and gives them the ability to interact with society. You need to focus it around the woman and get it right the first time. You won't get a second chance. Next. So how have we reached the digitization of 6 million beneficiaries through our bank-supported programs in Pakistan? It's been one transaction at a time. The most important part for us is data is vital. CNIC registration is vital, which is ID. Without a valid ID, you cannot have an account. Without an account, you cannot have access to a debit card. Without a debit card, you won't have access to the delivery points. How have we made a difference? So we've made a difference in outreach. We have women having access to over 40,000 plus pay points through bundling. You all know about what technology can offer and the services it provides. But what's important is it's been one step at a time, and it has been possible. And it's been possible with the Benazir Income Support Program, which serves the lowest strata and the poorest of the poor and the illiterate. So it's possible with everyone if it's possible with that segment of society. Next. So this is the science of delivery, how we've designed it. I'm not going to go into detail since we don't have a lot of time, but the beauty of digitizing a government-to-person program is that in about a couple of months, 7 months, you can digitize from 7% to 73% of your beneficiaries. So technology makes that possible. The scale, the numbers makes it possible. Next slide, please. Now this is where I would like to put perspective. We've talked about digital payments and how that's helpful for financial inclusion. But that's not just the only way. It's a lot more. It's a development of a system that leads to real financial inclusion. If you look at that quick graph there, Pakistan has 7 million G2P beneficiaries. And you look at Brazil and Mexico and South Africa, it's 9, 13, and 6 million. Not much of a difference, but these countries have moved phenomenally in financial inclusion. So how can we get there? Next slide, please. This is a quick snapshot of the programs. I'm sure you'll all get copies or have access to the presentation. You can look at that. Next, please. So how did these countries get there? The examples that we have is we need to focus on 3 items that we've had in terms of best practices within the bank and the programs I worked on. One is accessibility, which looks at cost and appropriateness. You need to make sure that you have outreach to the last mile. And we have enough evidence and enough services to give you last mile access. You have one of the most innovative solutions that you provide, especially with pay-to-go models that were just shown in the earlier slide. And I've seen some of them providing energy solutions in rural Sindh. It's phenomenal, the experience. So connect these with your financial services. The robustness, the security of the flow of funds. So in Nepal, the biggest issue was verification of these beneficiaries. And since it's a remote country, they used biometric payments with a biometric POS device. And it was crowdfunded. It wasn't very costly, but they provided a robust solution to a problem for a unique country. Finally, the state-of-the-art solution is the PD card example of Turkey. So they have a social security card. India has a similar example with the UID. Use the card for all social transfers. So you're doing an economy of scale then. Use the card as a savings account. Right now, our cards are specific for programs. So this is more of a policy decision. But it's important for you to understand that if you have one card for all social security payments, you have larger outreach, and you can use that with a branding, with OneLink or MasterCard or Visa to use across different platforms. Make a white label card. And I think we had, the Ignite presentation is very helpful in highlighting what VRG is doing right now. So the white label platform, so I'm getting notes, helps in expanding outreach. Next. Something that's asked often, because I worked in Indonesia, what do you do to have that payments revolution here? What is it that's required? I talk about three things. One is a dynamic registry. Make sure everybody's ID'd, you have everyone's data, because that's required to access the financial system. Have a strong payment system. I always recommend a white label platform because that allows others to come on, be it for G2P or P2P or whatever beneficiary you want, but focus on a white label platform. And then obviously tie that to financial services. The pay-to-go model can be tied to any white label platform. So focus on a white label platform with the financial services. So this is how the ladder goes. Next. Finally, partnerships. It's a win-win for all. So for digital payments, what you need to understand, everybody I'm sure already knows, the government wins, the private sector wins because it's a business, and the citizen wins. So it's a definite win-win for all, and that's how we need to showcase. But why it will be a win-win for financial inclusion, not just because of the partnership and the cost of the model, unless you don't tie in financial literacy, unless you don't tie in digital skills and literacy, you won't go above the divide. Every one of us has a mobile account. Everybody I know within my village as well has a mobile account, considering I come from a rural part. But none of them have the access to social media or the access to a transaction account. And I'm sure you all know a lot of us have help that can understand YouTube and how to get there, but they won't understand what you can do with an account and get a health insurance. They will still go and through their savings if someone gets married or someone gets hospitalized, but they will make sure they save enough data to watch YouTube or WhatsApp or whatever. So it's priorities. You need to have that digital literacy, financial literacy, and the skills to impart them that knowledge. Next slide. And that's my last slide. I've just posed these two pictures, given that it's possible. The first one with the people showing the cards is from a community in Indonesia that had no access to digital services in 1 year. They were part of the payments grid, and everybody was financially included. And that's a community that only speaks Bahasa. So they don't even have, the challenge is, the language was the first challenge. In our country, language is not the first challenge usually. So imagine starting digital literacy where you start with the challenge of language. And the other picture is in Tanzania, where the challenge was ID, and they've gone a frontier ahead on financial inclusion. We don't even have an ID challenge in Pakistan. We have the highest penetration and one of the best national ID registry agencies, which has been showcased. And in fact, Nadra helped set up one of the ID programs in Nigeria, which is now starting off on G2P payments. And as a closing note, I'd like to highlight that we have the best practices in technology, in ID, in crowdfunding. We need to put them together. And with minds like everybody being here today, it's a matter of putting the business model. So I'm sure we can get there. Thank you.